Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissack and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Good morning, Dana. So super excited. We're going to talk about be your future self today. That's a topic I've kind of been stuck on. So if anybody's been around me in the last few weeks, this is all they've heard from me. So
one of the best books ever, though. I mean, I had it right here on my most impactful bookshelf right here.
Yeah, honestly, I have fallen in love with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I love the way he writes. I think he's one of the best writers that have ever come along. And I'm kind of excited because you and I are going to see him in a couple of weeks in Columbus, Ohio, at the Rebel event.
Cannot wait. I know he's one of the big draws to that. I believe he's I'm super pumped.
Yeah. So one of his favorite books that I've read is Be Your Future Self Now. And I've kind of taken some ideas that I've gotten from Dan Sullivan, things Gary has taught me over the years, and honestly, things I've been really plugging into with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And, I kind of have just decided, a lot of people that we talk to right now, agents, Dana, they felt like last year was kind of a weird, confusing year. The last 2 years really, maybe feel like they've been in a rut, confused about what they should do, all of those things. And, I was thinking about it and I thought, the best thing all of us can do is just set such an impossible goal that it immediately, how Tony Robbins says, change your state.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
One that will honestly change our state. Because if we just keep setting small goals and the market doesn't cooperate or do whatever, it's easy for us to feel defeated, right? And so I hate that feeling because I don't think any great progress happens when people feel defeated. They don't. It doesn't, for me anyway. So I've been thinking and kind of resonating. That's one of the reasons why I'm going to do a 10X challenge coming up in the next month or so, is because I really think if we could learn, and when I was interviewed in 10X Easier and 2X, I really had this aha around how big my life got when I did things that seemed impossible.
Yeah. Or that, would you say, just totally scared you? Like they just scared you?
Oh, they were terrifying. I mean, when Gary was working on the MREA book and we were in his mastermind and he started, and I happened to say to him one day, gosh, I don't know, Gary, I just don't feel the same challenge I felt in building my real estate practice now that I'm at 200 transactions a year and I list probably 100 properties a year at least. I don't feel the same excitement and energy. I kind of feel like I'm almost stuck a little bit, and like I'm kind of a captured or a hostage to my success, which is kind of weird, but that's how we can feel sometimes, because you can't get off the gerbil wheel, but freedom, especially freedom, is so important to me. And that's whether it's time, money, relationships, anything, those are driving forces for me. So when I begin to feel like I don't know how to get those things with what I'm currently doing, I start trying to figure out how to get out of that. And so thank God I had Gary as a coach and I didn't just stop everything, which is what some realtors do, honestly, which is a big mistake. It should be a planned, where's my next big challenge or opportunity or impossible goal that would force me to change what I'm doing currently. And so that's kind of what happened. He said, why don't you find someone to replace you in your business and keep that business going? And honestly, Dana, at that moment, not a single realtor in the country that I knew of ever had done that. Mm-hmm. And so it was a terrifying goal, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of times, even if we set those big impossible goals, we leave our one foot on the ground over here. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I'm thankful I didn't do that. I'm thankful that Gary had something big for me to go do, which was to go build Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky for Keller Williams, which felt impossible because I didn't even know where those states were, much less how do you do that, right? And so, and not a lot of people had actually done it. Maybe there was a few, and I probably should have hung out with them more and asked them more questions, but we were all figuring it out at the same time. And I'd be like, what are you doing? And they'd say, well, what are you doing? And I would say to Gary, God, I just want to know I'm doing the right things and enough of them. He'd say, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm meeting with 22 people a week throughout these 3 states. I'm teaching a class and 100 people show up and they don't have a clue who I am. He said, yep, sounds like you're doing the right things. Don't you see more of it? But the beauty of that is the goal was so big and so impossible for me that there's no way I could have kept one foot in my team.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot of agents do is if they do set a big goal for their life,
Mm-hmm.
they keep their foot in the thing that feels secure and safe and complacent and
Yep.
comfortable.
Every
And
time.
they don't just really launch themselves into, I don't have any choice. I have
Mm-hmm.
literally stepped into something that's so big.
Yep.
I've got to rechange my focus. I got to rechange what I do with my time. I got to rechange what I'm saying yes to in a day.
Yep.
I mean, it literally forces you to really shake up. And I think that's what all of us need right now. After a year like last year and the year before, I think that's some of the best things that we could do. And so,
Yep.
I mean, I really think when you do that, there's questions that you have to answer about, because I think all of us make those kind of goals because we want a future that looks different than the future we have now.
100%.
And, you know, I didn't know it at the time, but by doing those things, and even like back when I hired my first assistant and no one else had assistants, that was an impossible goal back then.
Yeah.
So impossible goals can come in different sizes for different people.
Yep.
But what I did figure out later is who I became and who my future self became because I was willing to do those kind of things, even though
It's not.
I did them, most of them with wet pants on, as we
Yeah.
like to say, because I was terrified. Um, that's where the real value is I think we're all seeking to be someone, a future self that's bigger and brighter than the one we have. And so some of
Yep.
the questions that we have here are kind of around how to ask yourself these questions. If you have set a big goal or an impossible goal, some of the questions that you need to be asking yourself. So kind of what are your thoughts, Dana, around that? I know you always set big goals too, but
Yeah, I mean, I just have, because I learned that from you, and also, you know, when I read that book, it just completely shifted everything for me. I was trying to reach it, and I was trying to find something on my phone that goes right perfect with this. That was a quote that I read one time about being stagnant, and what it does for you, and it's not good for achievers, for people with an achiever personality. It is not good.
well, you know, when we explain the 4 C's, which is make a big commitment, and that
Yep.
means you're immediately going to drop into this terrible place called courage.
Yep.
And the reason it's going to take courage is because you don't really have the capabilities to
Yep.
do it. But
And you,
what happens when you do that is you get to a whole new level of confidence.
yep.
But the problem is most people
Stop
go
there.
from confidence to complacency.
That's right.
And as I've been teaching a lot of the top agents some of this stuff, one of the things that I realize is the reason they're complacent and comfort sometimes is because their success is actually
Yes.
keeping them there. They're
Yep.
so busy in their success that they're not really understanding the benefit or value of still setting big impossible goals, because
Mhm.
one that they set before has now got them comfortable and complacent and all of those things. And so, you know, really challenging yourself about how long am I willing to stay in this comfortable, complacent place?
Yeah. Well,
You
and
know,
I just think, like, I don't know, I think, you know, I make these vision boards every year, and some things are crazy that are on there, to be honest. And I know people look at it in my keynote and they're like, this girl has lost her mind. Like, this stuff is nuts. And truthfully, and I don't say this in like a rude way, but I don't really care because because they're my goals, and I want to have huge goals because I know that the big goals pull you through the small goals.
yeah.
and and I don't know why someone wouldn't want to have that big, because then you're being pulled instead of like, and sometimes I can look back and be like, wow, I don't ever want to live like that, so I'm going to do this, you know what I mean, or whatever. But I don't know, I just think when you have those big huge goals, for me it's very motivating. I know I've heard a lot of leaders and even people on coaching calls I've had and things say that they don't set big goals because they have such a, you know, ginormous fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, what happens when you don't hit the goal, or if you, you know, if you whatever. I mean, I just always kind of think, if it doesn't happen, then it just wasn't in God's plan for me, and that's okay, something else will.
Well, and normally when they don't happen, Dana, the falling short is way bigger than what the
Way
other
better.
win.
Yeah.
Even the falling short is a way bigger win than you would have had if you didn't,
Yeah. And
which
I mean, truthfully, I
I
think
hope
about it.
he's working on that failing
No,
book
that's,
or
I think that's John. Is Gary doing one too? John Maxwell's doing that ROI.
yeah, Gary's working on some stuff too, because he and I texted one day, and
Oh,
my
good.
aha was people who are afraid to fail don't start, and people who are afraid of failing don't quit.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. The reason you set a big goal is because you probably won't quit if it's important enough goal. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Um,
that's making me think about my yours too, but my all-time favorite of favorites, the Dolly Parton. One of my favorite quotes from her is when people said, like, because she just turned 80 last week, and she said, which by the way, she did this little video on Instagram, and she said, I'm going to keep going and keep going. And she said, and I hope my plastic surgeon will keep going with me too. And she was like doing all these funny things. But one of my favorite quotes of her, when people have asked her, why are you doing what you're doing? Or like, how have you had this success or whatever? And she says the most best thing ever. She said, I never tried stopping and I never stopped trying.
Oh, I love it.
And I love that, because why would you? I mean, I never tried stopping. So she never said like, hey, I'm done, I'm ready to throw in the towel. And then she said, and I never stopped trying. She still showed up every day and continued to try to be the best version of herself. And it's so true.
Well, and think about how big a goal that was for her to get on stage in a Dallas Cowboy outfit, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I would definitely wouldn't commit to that.
I wouldn't either.
But here's the thing, she was terrified. I don't care how much success she's had. The stuff she keeps putting in front of her are keeping her in that cycle of big commitment, courage, getting new capabilities, getting a new level of confidence. And she doesn't stop at complacency or comfort. She just keeps going. And because once you kind of figure out that that's where the real magic happens, because you become someone different, your life gets better, you help more people, it's more exciting. I mean, there's so many benefits to it. But one of the things that John says that I love is you need to set goals so big that when people that know you see you get them, they know there's no way it was you. It had to be God.
Totally.
You know what I mean? There's just no way you could have done that. And then I think Chris Hodges says, set a goal, a big goal, and then you take it so far and God takes it the rest.
Yeah.
Have you heard him tell the story about him? Because he lived in College Station near the Air Force Base, they used to have civilian rides in those big fighter jets.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And he wanted to ride in the fighter jet. Yes.
That was on his bucket list, because John took them all to a movie, and he says, I wouldn't recommend this movie because of the language in it, because he's talking to his church. And he says, but when we got through with the movie, he said, first of all, I wasn't excited about going to the movie because the only thing I like about a movie is the popcorn.
Yes, I remember that.
And so he said, but I went because John wanted me to. But he said, and I wouldn't recommend the movie necessarily to the congregation. But he said there was some good stuff in it. And he said, the bottom line is, when we got through, John said, how many of you have a bucket list? And he said, I'd never even set a bucket list.
Yeah.
And so he made them bring them the next morning what their bucket list was. And Pastor Chris could not put very many on there. He didn't have very many. Yeah. But one of the things that he eventually put on is to get to ride that civilian ride in that fighter jet. And someone gives me chill bumps. Someone at his church heard him say that when he was talking about dreaming big and trust that God will, help you pull it across the line. And he talked about the day that 2 5-star generals get up in his church and start walking towards him. And he knew immediately he was about to get, what he had asked for. And it's funny because I relate that to a time we had a regional meeting in Chicago. And I had on my 10-year bucket list 2 things that never happened. One was to fly on the Concourse jet.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is it's gone.
Yeah.
And then the other one was to have lunch with Jim Rohn, because he's always been like one of my favorites.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And Mark Willis announces in our meeting that we're all going to Chicago and Jim Rohn's going to be our speaker. And I knew in that instant, one of my 10-year goals was about to come true. So I immediately called Mark and said, oh, you're not going to believe this. And it was so cool because Mark said, well, you're not only going to get to have lunch with him, but you can have breakfast with him and you can open and introduce him. So it was like,
I love that.
So I just have always been a big believer in, dreaming big and setting big goals and
putting them out there, like putting it out there. I mean, you have to put it out there.
Well, they say it increases your odds when you start putting it out there, because other people will say, hey, how are you doing on that? And they'll remember and they'll help be accountability and remind you.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of the kick. I thought, let's talk about that today, because I think when we've had such years that maybe deplete people's energy a little bit or make them doubt whatever about the industry or whatever, I think it's time to go all in.
Yep.
Totally. And what I love, as I've been kind of thinking through my own journey of setting goals that seemed impossible at the time. And the problem with us being an entrepreneur is we've probably done this before in our life, but because we live in the gap in the gain instead of the gain, we're only thinking about what we didn't accomplish. You could have accomplished some major things and not be able to remember them as an entrepreneur because you're so on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dan
Well,
Sullivan says progress is only seen looking backwards.
yeah.
And so, so I think when I really had to think about it for this book, it really reminded me that we should never, ever stop setting an impossible goal.
Well,
One
okay.
that
Oh
really
my gosh.
disturbs you that you've just told the world you're going to do it, right?
Well, you're just making me think. I mean, if you think about it though, Linda, look at the people, that we look up to who've been mentors to us. Okay, Gary, John Maxwell, Mo, I mean, the list goes on and on. Um, they've never stopped doing bigger things. I mean, they've never stopped looking for what's next. And even John Maxwell, I remember the lesson he taught probably 2 years ago called his big boy bucket list. And he got up on stage and cried, and he said, I've had these bucket lists, and he said, and then I thought these bucket lists are all about me and I need to have these big boy bucket lists now. And he said, these things, I've got it somewhere and it's such a great list, but he said, these things on this list are things that I can't accomplish on my own. I'll get them so far and God will push them over. And then he said, and quite frankly, a lot of them might not even happen on this side of heaven for me. Like they may be after I'm gone. And I just remember sitting there like, oh, wow, this is what it's about. It's crazy to think about.
You think about with Gary years ago, before the company was tiny, he started putting international on all of his stuff, Keller Williams International. And that was a big commitment to put out to the world when we were this little rinky dink company that nobody knew if it was going to make it or not.
It's funny, that reminded me of Adam. I felt this is one of those things like a marriage moment that you feel bad about. I don't know, hopefully you have some too, so it's not just me.
Girl.
I'll never forget when Adam was redesigning his logo for I Love Coaching, and he got his office and he said, this is that I Love Coaching global headquarters. And I was like, that's a little extreme, to be honest, like global headquarters. And he was like, no, we're going to have coaches across the globe. And I was like, do you think that sounds like like, I was questioning him about it, to be honest. And he was like, no, like this is what I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. It wasn't 2 months. He had a coach from Australia and a coach from New Zealand. And I had to be like, okay, babe, sorry. But it's true. I mean, there is something to that. Okay, I finally found this on my phone. I knew I was going to find it. I've been searching because it's literally written on, I don't know if you can see this, on the back of like an envelope.
Lord.
But it's from Amy Porterfield's book. I love her so much. But her book, 2 Weeks Notice. And when I read this and I grabbed this back of this envelope and wrote it down on, because she said, human beings find happiness in progress. When we are not making progress, things get dark and we start to spiral. And that is probably the most true sentence of Dana Gentry that I've ever read in my whole entire life.
Me too.
Human beings find happiness in progress. When we are not making progress, we get dark and things get dark and we start to spiral. Gosh, and that's exactly what you are talking about with this Be Your Future Self and these setting big goals, because even if you set a big goal and you don't hit it, you had progress along the way. And that's where that's where you find happiness.
Yeah. So true. Yes. I love that. Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give you some of these questions and we'll kind of talk through them a little bit. So, and then what I'll do is I'll attach, we'll put an attachment to give you all the questions, because I don't think we're going to have time to do all of them today. But I think, again, when you're setting impossible goals, or you're thinking about who you want to be in the future, that you're not currently, that feels impossible, here's some questions that you could ask yourself along the way. What does my future self believe about money, time, health, and relationships? Because if you really think about, I can't remember what this is called. Press uses it all the time. That one, what you think kind of becomes what you do, become, the belief thing, the little chart. Press uses it all the time. I can't remember what it's called. It's some initials, but it's kind of the human thing that we need to think about when we're not getting the results we want. We need to go back to what are we actually thinking, because our thoughts create our actions and our actions create our results, and then our results either are good or we got to go back through the loop. But
so it was like, what does my future self believe about my what were the things?
My money.
Oh, okay.
time, health, and relationships. And I would say, let's say you set a big goal this year and it's about your relationships, not even about business or whatever. Then the first thing I would go investigate is, what are my thoughts around the relationship?
Yeah. How am I
And
thinking?
then, because whatever I'm thinking about that relationship is causing me to act a certain way. And those actions are getting me results, probably ones I don't really want,
That's right.
or no results because I'm not taking, actions.
Yeah.
So just kind of taking each of those in your life and asking, what would your future self, if you had already accomplished
Mm-hmm.
what you wanted to accomplish, you just imagine it already,
Yeah.
then how would you be thinking about your time, money, health, and relationships?
Yep.
And then, what habits has my future self made non-negotiable?
Mm-hmm.
I love habits. You know me, Dana. I read every single book about habits I possibly can. I love, which is one of the reasons I love with Jesse Isaac's thing. Is it
Yeah.
Isaac? Whatever you say it.
The big ass
His thing
calendar.
on the mini habits, he
Oh.
adds 4 a year. I
Oh.
love that
Yeah. That's
because to me, habits are such a
the stack.
starting point, and if you can get your habits right, then you're going to get the results that you want. But I think sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the habits, because we all have habits, whether we've actually put them in place already or they're just happening by chance, right?
That's
We
right.
have good habits, we have bad habits.
Yep.
So what habits has my future self made non-negotiable? And I love this one because I think, having worked with you and other great high achievers, one of the things that I see that get in their way more than anything is the things they're saying yes to.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. So what would my future self say no to immediately?
Yeah. That I would say over the last 18 months, that has been the single-handed thing that has made a
Yeah.
difference in what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Yeah. So, and then the next one would be, what am I currently doing that my future self would never tolerate?
Yeah.
And then I'll give one more and we can kind of talk about them if you want to, but what skills must I develop to become my future self?
Mm-hmm. Love that one. It's part of the cash.
And I think about that. And I think about, okay, let me think about the trajectory. Thank God I had Gary as a coach to save me from myself, but, but doing some of the things that I wasn't prepared to do, making some of the commitments that I said yes to. And I see this all the time with realtors who try to build a team.
Mm-hmm.
They're not committed to learning the skills, and they give up before they get to the great part.
Yeah.
Because freedom was such a driver for me, and I really understood that there's only so many ways you can get freedom of your time, money, and all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those was to leverage through people.
Yep.
I am not a natural person. I'm a just get out of my way, let me do it myself kind of person, which will run any great person off if you think, you want to micromanage how they're doing it or whatever. But I was so committed to what I wanted and who I wanted to become.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's still in progress, because I think as long as you work with people, you'll be getting lessons and learn a skill you need to have that you don't have. But I had to learn skills that I had never knew before.
Mm-hmm.
And that honestly, most of them weren't natural for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think sometimes we don't think about, if I say I want this as my future self, or I want this big impossible goal, what are the skills that I don't currently have that I'm going to have to go figure out how to get?
Yeah.
And I like to say who has them, and who has them in a way that I could learn them and like them, like to get those skills
That
myself.
reminds me of that story that John Maxwell told us about, learn from the person that has the skill. He said that go find the people that have the skill that you want to develop, not necessarily the life in all cases. And remember, he gave that example of Tiger Woods. He said, if you want to be a fantastic golfer and you want to have the best golf game out of anybody, then you would go and you would learn from Tiger Woods. If you want to be the best husband, you probably aren't going to Tiger Woods. You're probably going to somebody else. So you have to find the people that have that skill that you want to be able to do it. But that also made me think, my small group, we're doing the whole Enneagram thing right now, The Road Back to You by Ian, what's his face? And it's interesting because we were kind of deep diving on that this week in our small group. And I didn't realize this, but based on you'll appreciate this because I feel like we've talked about this so much. Based on your Enneagram number, which I think mine and yours was similar, but based on your number, I'm trying to find the image of it. There's a healthy version of you at that number, and then there's an unhealthy version of you. And my unhealthy version of me is anger. And then
Oh, me too, probably.
it stems from your gut because you're relating and you get angry in your gut and all the things, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I definitely would never describe myself as an angry person. Like I'm fairly generally happy all the time, but major things like I'm quick. I will
Me
go to
too.
anger, and it's because
Oh,
that's my unhealthy place where like other people who are um fours, threes, and twos or whatever, they go to shame. So like they're like, oh my gosh, like they feel shame, and that's
what's your number? What's your number?
eight 832. I'm a challenger, which
Okay, I think
does
I am
make,
too.
and then followed by achiever, which does make sense because I remember coming back and telling Adam and saying, mine said I'm a challenger and I don't know about that. And he's like, are you freaking kidding me? You challenge everything. And I'm like what? And he's like, you challenge the doctor. And I'm like, okay, valid point. I just have questions. But all that to be said, the reason why we're studying this in our small group is because God made you how you are, and so
Yeah.
you should know your strength zones and be able to go deeper on your strengths and who you are, what your strengths are, but then also who are you in your unhealthy place, so that you can pray about that, give that part to God, recognize when you're getting in that unhealthy space. It's not it's like
Hmm.
something's wrong with you, it's just that's how you're wired. But I say all that because it's making me think about all that, because if we really want to get to the best version of our future self now, asking these questions are so great, because even me sitting here thinking, what we were talking about, the skills, what skills does my future self need to develop now? Well, I really need to be working on skills to develop that, when something really I'm passionate about or something happens to somebody I care about or whatever,
Oh gosh.
instead of getting pissed, like I need to figure out how to hone in on those skills, because I don't want 10 years from now to be like, wow, I was so angry, you know?
Oh gosh, Dana, I can't believe you're saying this, because my prayer has been so much lately. Please, God, because I grew up in a pretty rough,
Yeah.
background, and plus I have that same thing, especially if it's like my family or something. And I just had something recently with my granddaughter and my daughter, and it just, I mean, literally, I lost my religion for a few minutes. And so I said, I'm going to get myself a new t-shirt that says, I love Jesus, but I cuss a lot. You know how the lady in Austin said I cuss a little? I'd have to say I cuss a lot. If it's something super, if I'm super passionate and loyal and whatever to that,
Me
man,
too.
I just go into a rage. And I was like, God, please, who am I going to turn away when
Yeah.
they think, well, I thought she was a Christian girl, And so, you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's
I
funny
did.
you should say that, because that is my thing I have to get under control.
Yeah.
And I try not to do it out loud in front of somebody, but I've done
Mhm.
it in front of people I really care about. And it's like, that is terrible.
Yeah.
So I get that. I really, really do, especially if if it's my family or somebody that I feel like I have to fight for. But I grew up, you had to fight. You fought, and we didn't think a thing of it. Cussing was like no big deal. I remember having to have a cussing jar in our house when my kids were growing up, and it was mostly for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't for anybody else. And it helped a little, but it has never cured me from when I'm really under pressure and I'm
Mhm.
upset. It has to be something super close, like family or something like that. It's
Yeah.
never, thank
Well,
God
and
it's
I even
not
found myself
public.
like, even, I mean, obviously when something like that happens, or some like, I get like that real bad if somebody's talking bad about somebody that I really care about, like things like that.
Yeah.
It just triggers me.
Triggers.
But then I was even thinking, like I have a friend right now that's going through cancer, and I've been like angry over it, because
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't know. I like, obviously I trust God in all things, and I'm totally expecting of a miracle for her. But also then when I think about it, instead of getting like sad, I mean, I do get sad, but then I find myself get like, I fault to being mad that it's
Mhm.
happening. So I think it's just interesting to know that, because that was the first thing I wrote down when you said about the skills, and these are just such
Mm.
powerful questions if you actually take time to go through them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think about leading people, and Jimmy says this to me all the time, because I feel like he knows exactly how to say things, or I don't know how he can say the same thing I say, but mine sounds different. And I've really had to learn to say, Linda, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're
Wow.
saying it. And so if I'm going to lead people, I need them to hear my true heart,
Yeah.
not because of the intensity I'm saying it or whatever. So, I mean, you could just go on this kind of stuff all day long, but it's so important to think about, because whatever our skills are now may not be the skills we need to get something big in our life or to become who we really want to become.
Yeah, they're probably not really, if you think about it. I mean, some of them maybe, but majority of them probably aren't. So I
Well,
love
and
that.
haven't you met somebody that you can kind of see immediately what's holding them back? You go, they are so talented. If they would just do
Yeah.
blank, or they would just see blank,
Yep.
and that with another person. I think it's
Mhm.
harder to see in ourselves.
Yeah.
But you can so see it. And so I do it all the time with somebody who's super talented. I'm like, she is so talented.
Mhm.
If she could just see this one thing,
Yep. Yep.
oh my gosh,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We just don't, it's harder to see it in yourself. I think it's why you really have to sit down and like journal through this stuff and
Yeah.
really, do what Abe Lincoln always said, it doesn't do you any good to lie to yourself. Like truthfully answer these questions about yourself, because I think there's just so much power in that.
Yeah. And I'll go ahead and have Zoe attached to this podcast, the rest of the questions, because I think they're all fabulous and they're all really things we should spend some time, kind of reflecting on, journaling the answers to, like you said, Dana.
Yeah.
Because I really think our answer to the last couple of years we've been at, and just every change and all the things that we have in our industry going on, is to go set way bigger goals that make us so uncomfortable that that's the only thing we can actually focus on.
Yeah, so good. Yeah,
Love
it. This is a great one.
Awesome.
I'm going to go, I've already answered these when I read that book 2 years ago, but now I'm wanting to go back and re-answer them. So I'll probably be working on that this weekend.
Yeah. So, hey, if we all are y'all supposed to get iced too? Maybe we'll all get iced in and we could just answer these questions.
I know, maybe so. I don't know. I haven't even looked because we don't normally get anything in Charleston. But then today somebody said there's a chance of snow here tomorrow, which would be crazy. So we'll see.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, remember, if you have not hit the subscribe button, please go ahead and do that now. And the greatest compliment you can pay Dana and I is two things. One, to pass this podcast along to anybody that you think would benefit from our conversations. And number two, give us a great review so that other people who don't know us can find our podcast. And if you have a challenge, an opportunity, a question, or a guest that you would love to see on our podcast, be sure and reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. Dana, I guess I'll see you at family reunion. I mean, I'll talk to you before then, but I won't see you. Oh, no, wait, I'm going to see you at the Rebel event in Columbus.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
All right.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.